The wait is over. Utah has their next offensive coordinator and maybe their next quarterback, too. We're talking about it all on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first view and listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If this is your first time joining our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in YouTube comments, as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel has you covered, and if you go to FanDuel today, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by Alex Napoles of KSL Sports. And Alex, big news. Earlier today, I was texting you as we're going to record tonight. Hey, we're going to talk about Utah missing out on their offensive coordinator hire, striking out again. And they struck out twice, and we'll talk about why that is a little later in the show. But they got a hit. They didn't completely strike out. They didn't get the third strike. They finally land a new offensive coordinator, and Jason Beck comes over, the offensive coordinator from New Mexico. And look, was this Utah's third choice? And yes, based on all the reports we've seen. Is there still a reason for excitement? Yeah. Lobos had the fourth best offense in college football this last year. That guy in Jason Beck, the one who spearheaded the charge, is now coming up to Salt Lake City. So I'm still excited about this hire and what it could mean. Yes, did Utah have to, wasn't their first choice, so that part of it. But just because it was their third choice doesn't mean this couldn't end up being the best option. And honestly, Beck's resume is impressive so far. So I'm excited to see what he can do in Salt Lake.
A good resume to bring in. Spent some time at Virginia, spent some time at Syracuse, was at New Mexico, it was closely involved with Bronco Mendenhall at Virginia, and then obviously now with the Lobos. But he, as you mentioned, the fourth offense in college football. Very good stuff that we've seen from New Mexico on paper and statistically. Hope that he can bring a little bit of that just high power offense that we saw from New Mexico this season and bring it over to Utah.
We do. I mean, you look, the Lobos record last year, not very impressive, right? It was 5-7, but the defense was the problem. They averaged 34 points per game, and they scored 30 or more points in 8 games too. So I'm excited to see what this offense looks like in Salt Lake City. I think there's potential for explosiveness and just points. And that's something that, look, we didn't get a lot of points last year. Not a lot of touchdowns, not a lot of field goals in Utah. So I'm excited for what this could mean. As I said, definitely frustrating. It's been a frustrating week, right? Like if we talk about it a little bit, Utah's first choice was Ben Arbuckle. You don't land him, lose out on him to Oklahoma. And then fast forward later in the week, you find your guy in Mark Leftwich, Texas State. And I think the Arbuckle one hurt, but still you look at it like, hey, it's hard to compete with the SEC just with the difference in resources. So it's like, it hurts, but makes sense why Arbuckle would go. When you lose out to Leftwich to a direct competitor in Texas Tech, that one hurts a lot more. And look, it's been going around on social media. I'm not the biggest guy who comes on here and be like, oh, I break this news like I heard this and that. And that this isn't breaking news. It's been reported by tons of people today. But I've also heard from sources I trust what everyone was saying, that Utah lowballed Leftwich, and that's why he ended up at Texas Tech. So that was obviously a bad look for the university, but I will give them credit for quickly pivoting and making what, in my opinion, is still a really strong hire, Alex.
It is a really strong hire. And when you look at this New Mexico offense, this is an offense who averaged 230 passing, 253 rushing. So I mean, a good mix of both. Yes, it's unfortunate that I think the top choice from what I've seen and from what we've seen as far as reports go, the top choice was Arbuckle.
Yeah.
But this is still not a bad the Beck hire is still not a bad move to make. I still think that it's a good move to make. He's also not as young as Arbuckle, but he's still a younger guy who brings a new experience to this offensive coordinator position. And so it was still interested and excited to see what he can do. Even though, yes, Utah's probably top choice in Arbuckle, unfortunately didn't choose Utah.
Yeah, he didn't. But Utah is going to have a chance to bounce back in a big way on offense next season. Now, one thing that's very curious, Kyle Whittingham's still the coach at Utah as of the time we're recording this show. Is he going to stay the coach? Is he going to adjust his style and allow Beck to do and operate what he wants? Or is he going to try to hold the offense back? Is Morgan Scally going to take over? And then is Morgan going to allow the offense to do what we want it to do and be more explosive? So those things are up in the air. Also a funny wrinkle that Beck was a former BYU quarterback. So that is just the kind of funny thing about him coming back to Utah, but playing for the rival team. So there's a lot of fun wrinkles to this, but I'm just happy the saga was over. As for candidates left on the board, I would have loved if Utah could have found a way to hire Brennan Marion, the UNLV offensive coordinator, but that was a popular name. And I even see Bartle of KSL Sports put out that was not trending in Utah's favor, hiring Marion. Well, we'll see if he gets a Power 5 job. He might get a Group of 5 coaching job, honestly, with how well UNLV's doing. And by the time you're listening to this, if you're listening to this a day late, maybe they will have even just upset Boise State and they're going to the college football playoff. A lot of still up in the air too, but either way, offensive coordinator hire is done. And the biggest thing now, Alex, is you can move on with the other things. Start adding your players and recruits a little bit in the high school ranks, but more so the transfer portal as you start to build this roster for what you hope is a big bounce back in 2025.
Absolutely. This hire, it's so important because obviously it's going to shape the offense of how Utah looks next season, of what they do next season. But more importantly, and obviously we just had an early National Signing Day, but I think having your guy, having named the guy, and having that new offensive coordinator, I think it helps tremendously with transfers, because I think when players in the transfer portal look at Utah and think about Utah, they're going to want to know who that offensive coordinator is. They're going to want to know who's going to be calling the plays and kind of what the plan is on offense for this Utah team, right? So it's a huge impact in what's going to come in the coming days for when the transfer portal officially opens on December 9th.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Especially all positions, right? Like want to know what the offense is going to be. Offensive line, wide receiver, tight end, running back. Those all want to know what it's going to be. But there's one position that wants to know a little bit more, and that is the quarterback. Most important position on the field. Biggest reason Utah fell short of expectations this fall, for my money. Well, we might also, with the new offensive coordinator hire in Beck, have a little bit of an indication on who Utah's next quarterback could be. We're going to discuss who we think it might be based on the most recent circumstances in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Mint Mobile. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coal. Yes, Christmas time, so we're going to talk about coal just to save a few bucks. So it has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with a purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. Mint Mobile makes it that much easier. To get started on Mint Mobile, you go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. There you'll see that right now all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch with Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer, you can get your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month. Go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. So make sure you guys head over to Mint Mobile today. All right, Alex. So one question has been answered for Utah this offseason. Offensive coordinator. Who's it going to be? We know now. It's going to be Jason Beck. Next one. And okay, maybe there's a couple. Cam Rising coming back, Kyle Whittingham, all that. We talked about that this week on the show. Next one. Who's going to be Utah's starting quarterback? Most important position on the field. Absolute mess this last year based on what Isaac Wilson showed. And overall, still Brandon Rose. Brandon Rose had nice moments, but there's not enough sample size there for you to go, that's our starting quarterback. And Wilson just wasn't good. So you can't go in with those guys. Talked about it on yesterday and our show, I think the other day. You cannot Cam Rising's not the guy. I'm sorry. Like, he great career. Appreciate all he's done. You cannot rely on the health of Cam Rising in 2025. You can't do it. So I don't think Utah should bring back Cam. Love Cam, legend, but just looking at what's happened, I wouldn't do it. But who's it going to be for Utah? There's a lot of names in the portal, and I actually want to bring up a couple of them in a moment. But anytime you hire an offensive coordinator, Jason Beck, an obvious connection is going to be his quarterback. And his quarterback did just enter the transfer portal, and that is Devin Dampier, who is now in the portal. Dampier, 2,786 yards last year, 12 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. That scares me, but I do want to give him a little bit of credit in terms of this. 19 rushing touchdowns and only a true sophomore. We mentioned how good the Lobos offense was. Lobos also had one of the signature wins down the stretch of the season when they beat 18th ranked Washington State. I have not been able to do a deep dive on Dampier's game yet. So that's going to be next week, just like we'll deep dive Beck's offense and talk about what the Lobos do and see what Utah would want to do similar to that. But I would absolutely be interested in a potential Dampier-Beck reunion at Utah. I am not all in, especially after not watching it yet, and saying this is the guy that Utah needs it under center. But if Utah signed Dampier, I'd be happy. And I think he has a chance to be a solid Power 4 quarterback as soon as next fall.
Absolutely. And I mean, you look at the numbers, and you mentioned the 12 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and I mean, not the best ratio, right? Not the best of numbers. However, I think more importantly for Utah is just something kind of Kyle Whittingham has said through the years. We need to put in a quarterback who's going to give us the best opportunity and put us in the best position to win games. And I think because of what we've seen from Isaac this season, because of the small sample size that you were mentioning about Brandon Rose, it might not be the worst idea in the world to bring in somebody who is familiar with Beck. It might not be the worst idea in the world to just bring in someone who can potentially be your guy next season. The question that I ask myself when I'm seeing all this and what I'm hearing with all the quarterback talk is, even with his 12-12 ratio, is that just going to be a better situation in the quarterback room than what you currently have now? And I think the answer is yes.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I just, with what he proved, I know it's group of 5 versus power 5, but it's got to be. I can't. There's also a difference in, like we said, like, yes, 12 interceptions is a lot. I think that's even more. Wilson had 11 or 12. I'm trying to remember. But the legs part of this has to matter when you rush for 19 touchdowns. He closed the season with back-to-back games with 3 rushing touchdowns. And he also did not have a multiple interception game after October 19th. So that's in signs of improvement, in growth, and showed he could ball out on a big stage against a team like Washington State. Like, yes, he only completed 11 of those passes, but still made winning plays. 28 runs for 193 yards in that game. I'm open to a running quarterback. Sam Levitt was more of a running quarterback when he got to Arizona State, and he's become more of a dual threat guy. And Dampier is already a little bit of a dual threat guy. So I would be happy if Utah brought Dampier, but he is not my number one guy I want at Utah next fall. Look, this is the transfer portal. This is the season of crazy things happening. Miller Moss is the guy I'm going after from Utah. Is Utah probably going to land Miller Moss? No, but like, why is Louisville so much better than Utah? I don't think they are. So I think if that's the school that's rumored to get him, and a couple of SEC schools are too, but like, why can't Utah make a strong NFL NIL offer? Try to get Moss. Weigman's in the transport through the A&M quarterback. I'm not a big fan of him. I really like Miller Moss, and maybe I was a prisoner of some of those early games he had in the season, but I don't know. He's got it to me. Like, I would love to see him in Salt Lake. If I'm Utah, you call the best guys first and work your way down the ladder. Dampier could be really good, and I'd be happy with him, but he's not the best guy. And I do think there are other, and it's not I don't think Moss is like unrealistic for Utah. Like, he's also got benched at USC. So I don't know why Auburn and some of these other schools are going to trip over themselves to land his services. I think for Utah, it's a little different because they have, like, what their quarterback situation is it was bad last year. So they are more than willing to take a chance on the bad that Miller Moss brings versus some of those other schools. I'm not sure they'll be ready to jump on it too. So Moss would be my number one guy. I'm still looking at it. Utah. Is there another guy, Alex, that you think Utah should be looking into?
I don't have a specific guy off the top of my head. I do think Miller Moss could be an interesting option for Utah. It'd be certainly a fun option for Utah. But I think no matter what happens, JT, and I think you probably agree with this, is no matter what happens, Utah needs to bring in help at that quarterback position. They need to have the willingness to spend to bring in a good top quarterback. Someone, I think the most important thing for Utah, besides obviously bringing in an offensive coordinator, is bringing in somebody who can be your guy next season, someone who can be the number one quarterback and really take Isaac under his wing and really take Brandon Rose under his wing and really give them the opportunity to learn the offense and an opportunity to gain some experience, obviously not game time experience, but just learning an offense and really figuring out who they're going to be as the quarterback for the University of Utah. I think that's the most important key for me, is just bringing in somebody who can be your number one guy next season, but at the same time be a mentor to Isaac and to Brandon Rose.
I left my mic muted. I apologize for the brief delay. If Dampier ends up being the guy, then he's only a sophomore. So that's what makes the mentor aspect of that interesting. Like if they get Dampier, does Wilson stay? And that I don't know. But also you cannot make. I hope Isaac Wilson stays. We did this recently. I still think he has a chance to be a good quarterback. You cannot make your decision on who you bring in based on keeping Isaac Wilson happy. You need to make your decision based on what's best for this program right now, and you deal with the fallout from that after that. With the way the transfer portal works, my focus, if I'm Utah, I want to be the best dang team I can be in 2025. And guess what? Transfer portal's open again next year. So I figure everything out for 26 and everything after that. I hope Wilson stays on this roster, but you cannot not add young players because you're worried about alienating some you got. No, college football is a year-to-year league now, which, yes, you can't neglect development, but you can find other young quarterbacks. Like Utah's adding Wyatt Becker. So we'll see what happens with Wilson, with all these guys. And there's several players who have now entered the portal away from Zora, leaving Utah. We'll have to find some time to talk about them. There's been a lot of news, a lot of stuff going on this week, and we'll have to break it down. And want to break down really briefly some of the thoughts from National Signing Day, which wrapped up earlier this week, as well as give my thoughts on the Big 12 title race. And I have a big takeaway about conference championships and how I think they could alter after this weekend. So I want to break all of that down in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel has you covered. And with FanDuel, you can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more today by heading over to FanDuel Sportsbook. And speaking of FanDuel, want to talk about some of the conference championship games this weekend. So in order to help me do that, I'm going to bring my friend Alex back in here. So Alex, looking at some of these conference championship games this weekend with our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm excited. I always love conference championship week. It's a bummer that Utah's not going to be in it, but still excited to see how it's going to go. First one, we've talked a little bit about Utah's new. I talked about Brendan Marion a little bit earlier. We got 10th ranked Boise State taking on UNLV in the Mountain West Championship game. Boise State in this one is getting 3.5 points. I am going to take Boise State to win this one by more. They're going to cover, and I think they punch their ticket to the college football playoff. How do you see this one?
It's going to be an extremely fun game. I feel like this is going to be a high-scoring, fun, entertainment conference championship game, but I do think in the end, Boise State will take it.
Genty is my Heisman pick. I think what he's done and what he has meant to that team, to me, he's more impactful than Travis Hunter. I'd give him the award, and I'm totally fine if Travis Hunter wins it. I think he's outstanding. Big 12 championship game, Iowa State, Arizona State. I am fired up for this one. It is a 2.5-point spread in favor of the Sun Devils, and Arizona State's been a heck of a story, but I got to be honest. I think Iowa State's taking it. I'm a big fan of Rocco Beck. I like the way the Cyclones defense is starting to play, round into form overall. I got Iowa State winning this one 33-27. It's a 2.5-point spread. So I do have Iowa State covering.
I'm going to go opposite of you on this one, JT.
Okay.
I haven't been impressed with Iowa State's play the last 3 weeks.
Fair.
If they can come in and play and look a little bit better and make this game interesting, I think we're probably having a different conversation. But I think ASU has just played the better football over the course of the last 3 weeks. They look like the better team over the course of the last 3 weeks. I'm taking the Sun Devils.
In our last 3 games, real quick, Georgia and Texas, 5 versus 2 matchup, 2.5 point favor are the Longhorns. I'm actually going to go Georgia to cover, but I'm going to do the Longhorns to win. I think it's a narrow win for Texas in impressive fashion. Then Oregon versus Penn State. Oregon's favored by 3.5. I think Penn State keeps it closer than everyone thinks, but I do think Oregon covers and wins by 6. And then the ACC championship game that night, Clemson versus SMU. I am going to take Clemson to upset SMU and put the committee in quite the bind that I want to talk about in the moment. SMU favored by 2.5, so I got Clemson covering. Alex, how do you see those 3 games?
I think Oregon will take the Big Ten. I think they'll end up the end of the season undefeated and head into the playoff undefeated. No question there. I'm going Longhorns in the SEC. I think Texas will take it. And then I think in the last one, I want to go Clemson for the chaos, but I think SMU will do just fine.
I hope SMU does it, honestly, even though I go back and forth either way. I like Clemson as well, too. So either way, however you guys are feeling, head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. They got you covered for conference championship weekend. All righty, talk about signing day really quick. Didn't get a chance to during the week, so we'll give more thoughts about it in the future, but 38th overall ranked class for Utah, highlighted by the likes of J.J. Buchanan, who's now a 4-star. Cyphers Polo's a 4-star. You got Kristen Thatcher, was a 4-star, now a 3-star. And earlier this week, Utah got a big flip as they were able to flip Rayson Gilroy. That's a 4-star back according to the composite, but not during the player rankings. Wyatt Becker. This class has a ton of potential to me. Utah has thrived on developing guys. I think there's some high ceiling and floor guys, and there's other guys with high ceilings and low floors. So I think this is a class that absolutely produces some starters for Utah. Do a lot of these guys contribute next year? I don't know if I'd go there, but there's a number of guys that absolutely could. So I'm excited about this class that Utah's added. And there was a lot of mixed feelings at one point about this group. But Alex, how are you feeling about them?
I'm feeling good after the dust settled, right? At first, I think coming into signing day, there was a little bit of concern on my part as far as the talent being brought in by Utah compared to other Big 12 schools. But then obviously, like you mentioned, there's been some big flips and some big commitments on signing day. You talk about Wyatt Becker, who I think has a lot of potential. Flicking the quarterback, I think also looks really promising. After signing day and kind of where we are now, I'm feeling a lot better about this recruiting class for Utah.
I am too. We'll break down a lot of these guys' games a little bit more. Almost every single one of them we have talked about at one point or another during the offseason of the show, but want to give them all their shine. That we'll do that next week. And as I said, we got a lot to get to next week. Transfer portal, quarterback, what the OC is going to bring in and Beck. But before we get out of here, final thought for you all as you get ready for one last college football weekend, conference championship style, of course, coming up. I think this is going to be a historic weekend for college football because if SMU loses, SMU is currently ranked in the top 10. If SMU loses to Clemson, so Clemson, who has 3 losses, like Clemson's not getting in unless they win this game. And they lost to 2 SEC teams. They got their doors blown off by Georgia to open the season. And they've gotten better since then, but still lost to South Carolina. That's a good South Carolina team, but still they lost. They got 3 losses. If Clemson gets in and 1 loss regular season SMU gets a 2nd loss in the conference championship weekend, and the committee decides to remove SMU for 3-loss Alabama, I believe that this will be the beginning of the end of conference championship games. I believe they will soon go away, and the biggest first domino will be falling. And this obviously has massive ramifications for Utah if there's not a conference championship game. I still hope there are auto bids. I've seen a lot of people calling out auto bids. I think if we were to take away the opportunity for the Big 12 and the ACC and everyone else to get a team in, I think that's a travesty for college football. So I hope that's not the case. But at the very minimum, I think we are really quickly heading towards the end of conference championship weekend, because if SMU didn't play in the conference championship game, they'd be in the playoff for sure as a 1-loss regular season team. But if they lose in the conference championship game and then get taken out, I really feel like all these schools are going to start pushing for conference championship games to be removed. There's already a narrative for that. This would only add fuel to the fire. So this could be a historic weekend for college football.
Oh, 100%, JT. If an 11-2 SMU is left out after falling is if they fall to Clemson, they're sitting at 11-2, and they don't make the college football playoff. I think I think you're absolutely right. There's going to be a major push to get rid of conference championship, which is interesting too, because like the committee came out and said earlier this week that they really value conference championships. So if that is true, and if that's the case, I don't see them necessarily punishing SMU for losing. However, we've seen the committee do some wild things over the course of the last couple of years, and so I would not put it past the committee for that to happen.
We have, and I just think it's really dangerous when you're penalizing a team for losing in a conference championship. You mentioned leaving out 11-2 SMU when that second loss comes in the conference championship. I just think that's bad for the sport. I really do, and I don't use hate a lot, but I really do. I hate the hypotheticals we do in college football sometimes. Games are not played with, I love FanDuel, but they're not played on FanDuel in terms of, hey, do I think Alabama could lose to SMU? Like, I don't know. Alabama would have a really good shot to win that game. But here's the deal. SMU has earned the right to be in over Alabama, just like everyone thought Georgia was going to walk all over Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech was one plays away from winning that game. I think SMU deserves to be in regardless of the results this weekend, and I think it's bad for the sport if we prioritize an Alabama team that has an abysmal loss to Oklahoma on their resume, another bad loss to Vandy. They got some good wins, sure, and I have no issue with them being ranked above Miami, but for them to be then ranked over then put them over an SMU team and you're penalizing a conference champion, I hate it. I really do. So it's going to be interesting to see what this weekend looks like. I can't wait for it. I'll be back next week, talk about all the things for Utah. Who's going to be the quarterback? What does the new offense look like under Beck? That will be on next week's show. But in the meantime, hey, Alex, people are looking for something to do on their Saturdays. I think I know a place they should check out.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for anything to do on Saturday and you're local and you're driving around, tune in to 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone, the Saturday show. Me and my guy, Christian Esparza, host that every Saturday from 10 to noon. And so we're there. If you want any other content or anything else related to me, my handle is just right there at Napoles Alex. You can follow me there, or you can follow any of the KSL Sports stuff at KSL Sports.
Alex, you're the man. Appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks for the invite, JC. Always a pleasure.
Utah fans, I hope you all sleep well. We finally have an offensive coordinator. Now, what does the rest of the offseason look like? Oh, it's going to be a wild ride. Make sure you keep it at Locked On Utes. Hope you all have a fantastic weekend, and thank you for continuing to support our show during a hectic offseason.